Welcome to another episode of Actually You Can. In this empowering episode, I had the privilege of chatting with Elliott Stenson, a personal trainer and coach on a mission to help people overcome obstacles and live happier, healthier lives. In this episode, Elliott courageously shares the obstacles he has had to overcome on his journey to sobriety. His experience fueled his passion to provide wellness education, tools, and resources for his clients to help them build new habits, find fulfillment, discover their purpose, and confidently navigate life's challenges. If you're seeking inspiration and the tools to overcome your current obstacles, this episode is for you. It's time to take control of your life and unlock your limitless potential, because actually, you can. Hi, Elliott. Welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Miff. Very excited to get the ball rolling.
And today we're going to speak about your incredible journey to sobriety. And before we dive right into this journey, I'd love for you to share with the audience a bit about yourself. Who is Elliott?
So I am an online personal trainer and coach, and I coach men and women in my personal coaching business to help create positive lifestyle change through habit forming and just behavioral changes as well. And in my personal training business, I coach men roughly aged 25 to 35 just to use that as a foundational tool to create better mental health.
And so you have an incredible story about how you ended up doing what you're doing today. And so I'd love to dive into a bit about that. How did you end up in this coaching space?
That's a great question. So several years, it was actually just before the whole COVID thing happened. I sort of pondered on where I was going with my life. I wasn't in the best headspace. My life was sort of all over the place. And I think naturally people have come to me all my life for guidance and for support and my input. So I wanted to lean in on those strengths and use them. And that led me down the path of academic things, and I really put a lot of thought into what good mental health looks like. And there's a physical health, there's a mental health, and a spiritual health aspect that I think needs to be in coherence with each other to create overall good health. So I started my personal training journey there. That's where I first started, and I got a scholarship in life coaching and NLP practices, and I also was very interested in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and did some practical philosophy through Practical Philosophy Australia. So all those things really helped me hone in on some natural skill sets, and which has led me to where I am today to be personal coaching and personal training.
And you have some incredible natural skill sets, and I'm really keen to dive into them a little bit more in a second. But before we do that, you mentioned that what prompted you to enter the coaching space was you're pondering a bit about your life and you potentially weren't happy with where you're at. What was going on for you?
At that time, people go out and they sort of drink and have fun and party and stuff. But I think when things get in the way in life, people have emotionally traumatic experiences through bad breakups, through a range of different things, and it becomes less about going out and having fun, and it becomes more of a coping mechanism to deal with stress and to deal with probably some suppressed emotional traumas that people really don't know anything about. So for me, it was compounded over time, and my desire to go out and have fun with my friends became a coping mechanism to deal with my emotions and to deal with other things. And that I falsely, through the lack of life experience, thought that I could just stop doing what I was doing whenever I wanted. But I learned through my own experiences that the power of habits and, the dopamine response in the brain and the way that we reward ourselves at the end of a day or the end of a week, it really comes back to bite us if we're not aware of how we choose to spend those things. So for me, I was in a very bad place. I was drinking excessively. I was taking recreational drugs, and from my own depths of my own mental health struggles, I sort of observed that space and observed the community, observed everything around that, and I felt like I had something to offer, and I started that journey to clean myself up, and now I want to help other people do the same thing. So
Yeah, and I think hindsight is such a wonderful thing. You're able to look back on that time now and realize that you were using alcohol and recreational drugs to sort of cover up some potentially emotional trauma and use it as a coping mechanism. What were
mm,
those tools for you in the moment? What did you think you were doing, or what did you think you were gaining by drinking excessively and using recreational drugs?
it's not really a conscious thought. I think in hindsight, it is. You can see it for what it is, but when you're in that moment, it's not really. It wasn't like a conscious decision that I'm going to do this to fix this. It's not. It sort of becomes your behavior becomes so automated that your self awareness sort of plummets. So you can't see things for what they are in those moments, and that's where I feel like other people that are in a much more positive state in their life, like say where I am now, I want to help those people raise awareness for their habits, raise awareness for their surroundings, and try to help them get out of the position that they're in. And that's where I'm using my personal training as a tool to help men that find themselves in a rut and that find themselves in a position where they can't see their future as a prosperous, world, and get them out of that through tools like personal training. Because I feel like physical training is a foundation for good mental health, and being able to conquer those internal monologues that you have with yourself, the thought processes that you have, the low self-esteem, the low confidence, the lack of self-awareness and discipline. These things can be countered by physical training as a start in the behavioral change triangle. You have thoughts, emotions, and action. So if you can intervene at one of those points, which would be action, thoughts and other feelings will proceed after that. And I really tap into that space as much as I can and try to um, emphasize that the importance of exercise in some way or another. You know, find your passion and go nuts on that.
Yeah, and I think you and I share very similar philosophies when it comes to exercise. I definitely feel like I probably entered the exercise space as most young people, especially women, do as a tool to lose weight. And then you soon realize that the physical body can be a great vehicle for influencing the things, as you mentioned, like thoughts and emotions and your beliefs. And
Mm,
it's amazing what can happen in that space. And so I'm interested, you
mm,
also mentioned that something that you've learned throughout this journey and you support people with is habit forming and positive habit forming. There's obviously, especially with drinking and taking recreational drugs, a limit to where, a drink or so a week, you could be like, that's fine. At what point did the drinking and the drugs start becoming an issue? What threshold is that?
I think when you lose control of I think when you lose control in general. So if you're not in control of your actions, if you are living impulsively uh, around those things. So like if you can't even go to a social event without being drunk or tipsy, or you know in public socially, you feel it finding yourself awkward, and which is a lot of people I've found. A lot of people that I coach that want to come to me to be sober, I ask them, is that actually what you want? Because it's not that people want to be actually sober. It's just that they want to be in control of their impulses. They want to be confident in social situations without drinking because they've been doing it for 10, 15 years. That's all they do is when they go, we drink. And then you feel confident. But when you go and you don't drink, then you get social anxiety and all these words that pop up that it's like, well, you haven't actually been in a social situation sober for 15 years. What you can't expect to be confident in that situation. So for me, it became an issue when I was doing it quite a bit. It wasn't just Saturday night, it was Friday, Saturday night, then it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then it was sometimes during the week. Then it was snowballing, and I had to put a stop to it and really reflect on the root cause of these things and take ownership of those things and fix those things. And it was a much longer journey than I anticipated. In my head, for some reason, I thought it might have been a year, but it took me 2.5 years to fully commit to that and get out of my own way and stop self sabotaging. And that was, it's so liberating at the end of that to be able to venture out and lean into yourself. So it's something I do encourage people to gain control over your impulsive behavior and gain control in general of your life.
And you mentioned for you, it was the snowballing. It started off as 1 day a week, and the next minute you're like, oh my God, it's 4 days a week. And I think, it doesn't have to be drinking or recreational drugs. It can be something like your nutrition choices or any sort of addictive behavior. It soon starts to snowball. If we look back at the thoughts, emotions, actions, how did you intervene at the actions to be able to stop the snowball effect?
I think, well, you can't expect to heal in the same environment that you were sick in. And that for me was eliminating the environment that I was putting myself in, for starters, and also just putting myself I shocked myself a little bit through training. I was getting up at, really early and running, 400-meter sprints in the dark and getting in the ocean in the middle of winter and stuff. And I was really trying to put myself in these really uncomfortable situations. At that time, I actually read David Goggins' first book, and that was pivotal for me because it was just what I needed at the time, I think, just to sort of gain back control of myself. And that really helped me. That's a great book. So,
Yeah, and you mentioned that you picked up David Goggins' book, and I'm interested to hear what was, and I don't like using this terminology. I mean, a lot of people say that they need to hit rock bottom, and I hate the use of that phrase, but they need to feel some sort of pain, or the pain of not doing something or doing something is greater than what you'd get by not doing it. And so I'm interested to hear from you. What was that threshold? Was it you read this book and realized that there was another way of doing things? Or what was your threshold that prompted you to step through and decide to make this change?
I think it was I think it was his story. Like, his story was very interesting. It made me also think, like, comparison isn't great. It's like, it's when you compare yourself to others, it can be either, people get like the victim mentality, or you can be motivated by it. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I sort of felt like I was just feeling sorry for myself, and it sort of triggered me uh, to go harder on. It's hard to put into words because of the space. I was trying to think of the headspace that I was in at the time. It really wasn't a good headspace, but
What was
it
that
was
headspace?
very self-destructive. It was very, um, I felt like everything I did, it wasn't good enough. I felt I'd had back-to-back failed relationships. So I was really internalizing that and trying to understand why. And, you know, I wasn't looking after myself. So there's no wonder that those relationships didn't go the way that they went the way they did. But uh, going back to the Goggins thing, I think it was just the way that, it's hard to put into words, really. I think it was the way that his story inspired me. It was just the things that he did, and the position that he was in his life inspired me to create change in mine. I think, and that's all it was, really. It was just a very inspirational book.
Yeah, and it also sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, a case of right message, right time as well. Like there could have been a time where someone gave you that book, for example, and you'd be like, cool, I'm good. Like it could have been when you're drinking the 1 day a week. You're like, I don't need this right now. But it sounds like it was also
Mm.
the combination of the right tool came at the right time for you. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I really want to emphasize that habits work both ways. Like, these little habits, and this is what I try to point out. These little habits that I had, and you don't realize they're a habit at the time. You can go out every Saturday night for 5 years, but your mind is anticipating that 3 days before you go out. That your bad habits are equally as powerful as your good habits. So those little nights out here and there, yeah, cool. But also setting your alarm early and going to the gym and preparing your meals for the next day. All these little habits are very powerful as well. And when they're compounded, it's quite amazing what happens. So, establishing a habit and making it a non-negotiable thing that you want to implement in your life is very, very powerful. you automatically over time, when you commit to those non-negotiable tasks, will create discipline. And discipline is really just self-obedience, right? When we're young, we have our parents or some other adult influence in our life that we are obedient to. But at some point in your life, you remove yourself from that and you move out, or, you live alone, and all of a sudden you're relying on yourself to be self-obedient. And keeping that and sustaining that over time requires you to set yourself goals, set yourself small goals, and that turn into big goals over time, and to adhere to those. I think people uh, negotiate too much with themselves based on their feelings, and discipline requires you to do things, you know, regardless of how you feel, because there's a greater task at hand. And I think those habits, the bad habits, yeah, okay, we can clean those up, but the good habits have to stay, and you have to not negotiate those. You have to do them. That they contribute to the bigger goal ahead.
And so, what would you say were some of your bad habits, and what habits did you replace them with? Because I think it's really easy for someone to say, hey, just stop doing the thing. But us being humans is we're going to find something
Yeah.
else to do instead to replace that. So, I'm curious to hear what that habit situation looked like for you.
My eating was all over the place. That was one thing. And I think to eat well, you should be, most of it's preparation, right? Obviously, people see other people and say exercise, and they prep their meals for the week. It doesn't have to be like that for everybody, but preparing what you're going to eat the following day at the bare minimum will set you up you get to choose what you put in your body rather than react to your hunger the next day and say, oh, well, I better go to the shop and just buy whatever I can to eat. So that was one area of my life that I really cleaned up. And my other bad habits obviously were surrounding my alcohol intake. That was one thing. And being able to remove yourself from temptation first before you try to resist temptation. So rather than going to the pub and not drinking, maybe try not going to the pub at all, maybe go somewhere else to socialize with your friends. That's another option that you can do. So, and obviously that goes for, uh, my bad habits, taking drugs and things like that was the same rule applies.
Yeah, and I'm interested to hear from your point of view too. I think it's really common, especially, you know, you develop friendship groups when you're younger. And a lot of the times, especially when you're
Mm.
18, like around about 21, you're going out drinking a lot. And so, how did you manage to still get that socialization, but in a different environment? You mentioned that you can't heal an environment that made you sick. How did you still get that need for connection and socialization when potentially some of your close relationships or close friends maybe really still enjoyed that? They weren't into the same things you were.
That's a very good question. So at the start, I would not be going out and doing those things, but I also wanted to make sure that it's something in my own head. I don't know if this is going to be right for everybody, but I wanted to socialize and be able to resist the temptation. So it took me a while. It took me a little while to get used to that, but I still went to weddings. I still went to bucks parties. At the start, I would go out a little bit, but then I realized I'd much rather get 8 hours than go and socialize with drunk people, and but for others, there's other community groups. You can sign up to gyms. There's breathwork classes you can do. There's lots of different things now. Pilates is really good. There's different community groups where you can get involved in and create new friends. And I think obviously that is a important part of creating a new lifestyle, is being able to shed old parts of you to create new ones, to lead a way for new pathways, and being able to identify what characteristics you really want to embody as a person, and think about those things, write those things down, and then embody those characteristics. Like that person that is dormant inside of you, that's there. You're just getting in your own way. So embody those characteristics to become that new person.
Yeah, and I'm interested to hear when you were looking at who you want to be, did you experience any resistance from the people in your current environment? So I find often when you're trying to do something new or you're growing into a new identity, sometimes the things in your environment may no longer fit, and that can be really hard and uncomfortable. And a lot of the time, um, well, there's people who just don't have the strength or resilience to see it through that stage, and they just stay in the environment because they don't want to be rejected, maybe by their friends, or the change is scary and uncomfortable. What was that experience like for you, growing to that new identity?
Um, I think my friendship circle has always been very supportive. Uh, I I expected more. Uh, I expected more people to pop their head up and probably not show me the support, but it happens. You're going to have people that um, they might do it in silence. That's the thing. But most of my friends, or all of my friends, have been very supportive of me, and
How
I
wonderful.
feel that it's been easy, and I really want to promote that for other people as well. It's something that I find with my clients that they want to eliminate drinking or reduce their alcohol intake and stuff. And one of the biggest things that they're worried about is that their friends and the people around them are going to look at them differently or peer pressure them and all this other stuff. And it creates quite a bit of anxiety around the decision for them. So if you've got someone in your friendship circle that wants to reduce their alcohol intake, or they want to do something else on the weekend rather than going out to a bar or nightclub or whatever you decide to do, encourage that and lean into that and support that, because that's a good friend. I think if somebody does peer pressure you and they start hanging shit on you, I mean, that person just knows that they don't have the strength that you have to be able to do that. And I'd probably be reviewing my friendship circle if people were trying to pressure me into doing something I didn't want to do.
Yeah, and I'm keen to hear your thought on this too. For example, if I was one of your close friends during that time and I was like, "This is silly. Like, why are you doing this? Come on, have a drink." What would you say that
Mm.
says about me as a friend? Why are some reasons why I could be resistant to your change?
I think deep down that person is actually inspired by you. It's just that they lack so much confidence in themselves to be able to do the same thing. And also, it might not even be their fault. I mean, some people, in behavioral change, are not aware or conscious of their own behavior. So it's mind blowing to them that their close friend might want to create change that they don't even know that they want to do themselves, if that makes sense. So when I've noticed that, and I knew that once I, do my 12 months sober and whatnot, that I would influence other people around me to do something similar or something the same. And I've had quite an overwhelming response from people, which is great. And I love that. So have the confidence to back yourself in those moments, because the people that will hang shit on you at first, they will go away and reflect the most, because it's so foreign to them. But I can guarantee you that they're the ones that need it the most, and be there for them, be there for them as well, which is sort of hard to get your head around, because they're the ones sort of encouraging you to to break. You know what I mean? Eventually, if they don't, and you're better off going your separate ways. They're sort of dead wood.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I see this a lot in a number of different environments because I think it's just innately human is we all want to feel part of a tribe. And so as soon as we feel like we're a bit different, there's not a lot of people who feel comfortable with that. Like even in the gym space, and I'm sure you get this too in group classes, I find often if a client is injured and they might not be able to do a particular movement standard, they go, "Oh, I don't want to burden anyone. I don't want to do anything differently as prescribed." And I'm like, how about instead of seeing your, I guess, inability at this point in time to do a particular movement. If we're taking back squats, they go, I can't back squat at the moment, my knee hurts. I'm like, what if I gave you an alternative? And even though you're not doing the program as prescribed, I gave you this alternative and you showed everyone else that there is alternatives. You essentially gave permission to other people to do this differently too. Just because it might not look like what everyone else is doing doesn't mean that it's not the right path to you. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that too, because I definitely think as much as we want to fit in, by stepping into the person we want to be or doing the things that are right for us, we actually can inspire people to do the same for themselves as well. So it's really beautiful we say that. I'm interested,
Mm.
you mentioned at the start that your journey to sobriety took longer than you probably anticipated. What reasons was that? What came up that was unexpected?
There's probably a few catalysts, to be honest. There was obviously, I actually wanted to go sober around my 30th birthday, and we were in the middle of lockdown. So that didn't happen. I'm in Melbourne, so we were pretty heavily locked down. So once we came out of that, it was a bit of a party time for a little bit, and then once I started approaching my 32nd birthday, I was like, nah, this is it. And I actually had to visualize, because I do visualization processes, and I had to visualize my next 12 months. And I realized in that moment, my social life is never going to end. Like, there's no right time for this to happen. I just have to commit now and, move forward. And I stopped at, I'm going away I'm emceeing my friend's wedding in Italy. So that'll be my 12 months and coming up soon. And I'll be having, I'll have a glass of wine there. But for me, that was what it was. It was coming out of lockdown, and it was, to be honest, I knew years ago that this was the last piece of the puzzle for me to start my coaching journey and to start my everything. I had to, it became, okay, I'm going out once every couple of months and all this sort of stuff. But I knew deep down in my mind, I had to be honest with myself. And I think that's very powerful for people to understand, is that you can lie to everyone. You can put yourself on social media and to the world, and you can lie and lie and lie, but you can't lie to yourself. It's impossible. Your subconscious picks it up and it buries itself. And when you're not congruent with yourself, and you tell little white lies, or you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, your body picks it up. And it sort of comes out in a way of a poor self-esteem and low confidence. And if you don't believe that you're going to do something in yourself, like what, as if you're going to expect to achieve anything great, you need to be true to yourself. You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to do what you say you're going to do, because that's massive. That's big for building confidence and self-esteem.
And you mentioned that we tell lies to ourselves. I'm interested to hear, what lies were you telling to yourself when you were excessively drinking and using recreational drugs? And obviously that's different to the life that you're living now. Would you say that the life that you're living now is more true to you?
Oh, by 1,000 times. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the lies I was telling myself back then was that I was in control. I thought that I just thought that because I was so strong-willed, like in my youth, I just thought, I got this. Like I know what I'm doing consciously. But through lack of experience, like the reward systems that you have to tap into, and the actual chemical responses that's happening in your body when you drink and when you take drugs, in your mind with dopamine and all these other different things, and the bad effects that it has on your stomach health as well. A lot of people, they reach out to me after 3 months, I start getting lots of messages, and people are like, hey man, what's going on with my stomach? There's so many different gut health issues that people don't realize is happening because of excessive amounts of binge drinking or whatever it is. It's quite significant. So probably the little white lies was that, yeah, I'm in control, and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, but not really actioning anything. That manifests itself in your body, and it starts to, your subconscious mind starts to lose confidence in yourself. You start to lose confidence in yourself over time, and it just compounds into depression. It compounds into like, this person's full of shit, and it's your own mind telling you that. So negative self-talk doesn't have to always be fully beating yourself up. It could be you just saying, I should do this, I should do that, I might do this, I hope to do this. No, just peel it back a little bit. Set yourself 2 or 3 non-negotiable tasks every single day that you want to do, and that contribute to being the person that you want to be, and embody those characteristics and do those things regardless of how you feel. And that is probably the best way that you could start to create that new life and let go of the other person that you used to be.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the non-negotiables because I think I experience this with clients as well is often when clients come to you, they're really enthusiastic about doing all the things. And again, if I use the health and fitness space as an example, people will be like, yep, I want to train 5 days a week and I'm going to do that. And I might not be training any days of the week. And so I usually go, cool, let's start with 2, for example. Let's go to the gym twice this week. Because what happens is
Mm,
if they say they're going to go 5 days a week and then they only go 3, then like, I failed. And to your point with the non-negotiables, I think it sounds even really silly sometimes, but you have to set yourself a goal that you know you'll crush to be able to start to build that
mm,
self-confidence up. It might be even something like if you're looking to introduce exercise, walking to your letterbox and back. Like if you're not someone who walks, just simply setting yourself such a seemingly small goal, but to your point, it will help reinforce that confidence and help getting out of that self-talk loop.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a good one is making your bed as well. I mean, how, you can't
Yeah.
expect to change the world if you can't even make your bed, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's very accurate. Just start small, and I read something from James Clear the other day. It was really good. It was when you're creating a new habit is standardize before you optimize. So make
Mm.
something create a standard before you try to optimize something. So it's very powerful, especially for habit forming.
Yeah, I love that approach to it. Um, and I'm curious to know because things like alcohol and drugs can disconnect you from self and can make things really blurry and stuff like that. And so I remember earlier on you mentioned that a lot of people come to you advice and that's sort of what helped you to also go, coaching is something I'd like to pursue. At what point did you start getting more clarity in direction? Was that throughout your sobriety journey, or it was only after you committed to being sober for a particular period of time you started getting that clarity? But what did that look like for you?
It was probably prior to sobriety. Definitely, actually,
Mm,
I think clarity comes from being very very specific about what you want to achieve. And
mm,
s- when I say specific, I mean I visualize everything in terms of how my future looks, who's around me. I try to adopt senses into that visualization process, smells and things like that. So
mm.
when when I when you become specific, you start to your focus starts to sort of you put the blinkers on and your focus starts to shrink a little bit. You start to focus on one thing at a time. There's so many distractions in our life. And I think, part of increasing your focus is eliminating those distractions and obviously becoming very specific about what it is that you want to achieve. And that's why I say for my clients that want to they come to me and say they want to be sober, but I know that, I dig a little bit deeper because it's a bit more specific than that and hone in on those things, and that's where clarity will come, and you'll build on that. So I definitely came before I went sober, and then obviously post sober, things start to really click. And your focus starts to become rather than being focused 2 days a week, you're focused full the time, and you become pretty hyper focused on what you're trying to achieve. So I try to be very present, but I'm also in my mind, I'm living a little bit ahead of myself because I'm like, that's where I'm going. So I'm like, I think it's important to chase your goals and your dreams, but also ground yourself at the end of the day and practice gratitude and bring yourself back to the present moment and then start again the next day.
And you mentioned that visualization is a tool that you use a lot of. I would love for you to
Mm.
share more about exactly what that tool looks like. It's not a case of just thinking of a pretty picture or something like that. You mentioned you're putting some life into it, you're smelling things, and no doubt there was some sounds and stuff in there too. For someone who's not familiar with the power of visualization, I'd love for you to share a bit more about that.
Yeah, it is a little bit more than just think. Like I actually find myself feeling uncomfortable in my visualization process because, you know, I'm imagining my ideal self, which means that I have to push through personal barriers, and I'll push through them in my head first so that when I feel like I'm in that situation, it will be easier. But, for example, it could be public speaking or something. And if you're sitting there visualizing yourself is in as much detail as you can, speaking to 1,000 people in a room, you find yourself feeling pretty uncomfortable just sitting in your bedroom with your eyes closed. So it's like one of those things where you try to live that moment in your head over and over again until it becomes sort of more natural. And when you find yourself in those moments and your focus and attention is on those moments, something will present itself in the material world. And it's extremely powerful. There's things that have happened that I've visualized, like I was visualizing over and over again for say a week, and then an opportunity would present itself, and it was just a bit like it was a bit of a spin out. But that process, really try to adopt as many senses as you can. Try to be as detailed as you can in those processes, and yeah, something will present itself. I can guarantee it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not only a tool to your point, like picture your goals and where you want to be, but it's also like some form of rehearsal. I mean, athletes do it all the time too. You have the physical practice, but no doubt they're at home thinking, okay, these are the plays that I need to execute. And they're not thinking of executing the plays and failing. They're thinking about executing them and being successful too. So it seems like it's a really, I guess, low barrier to entry to start to embody the person you want to be and the actions you want to take more specifically. Because as to your point earlier, you mentioned that in terms of behaviors, we've got our thoughts, our emotion, and our actions. So it's, I guess, a way to practice the thoughts and the emotions
Yeah,
that will drive those actions.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you have to be able to see the end goal, right? Like most people, if you can see the end goal and you reverse engineer it back from there, it makes the whole process a lot easier. You can visualize what obstacles are going to get in your way, how you're going to mitigate them, what you're going to do to remove them, and you can create clarity in that visualization process because you can see the path that you're going on. You can see who's going to be in the way or what's going to be in the way. You can see yourself living that lifestyle. And that's where you become, okay, I've got a bit more clarity about what I am. I've got some direction. I've got a path to follow. You're never just going to end up where you want to be just by random. You have to plan it. You have to execute that. It takes a lot of work. And that process is important for me because it helps me, it helps give me a lot of clarity.
Yeah, and we've used the word clarity a lot here, and I think it's really interesting. With one of my other podcast guests, he went through a pretty horrendous illness, and it resulted in some very life-changing implications. And something that drove him to go through that time was setting goals. And so I'm interested, if someone's in a fog, or if they go, and this is something I hear a lot, especially at the moment, is I don't have clarity, I don't know what I want, or I'm looking for more clarity. How would you help someone to gain more clarity? And what are some reasons why someone might not be able to get clarity if they're not feeling clear at the moment? What are some reasons why that might be?
Clouded judgment is something that is like a lot of people are living other people's lives. So I think all these different things sort of, they coincide with each other. Your values are very important, and understanding what's most important to you, not what's most important to your mum or your dad or anything, your partner, what's most important to you. So identifying and actioning those values will give you a bit more clarity. So your decision-making process does this align with my values or not? And if it's a no, that's an immediate, I'm not doing that. If it's a yes, then that your decision-making process is a lot easier. And with clarity, that sort of comes with a bit of focus as well. So whatever distractions that you have, and this is where procrastination comes in as well. A lot of people procrastinate and avoid the task. So eliminating your distractions will increase focus, which will give you more clarity. And doing all these things together, it's not just one thing. These things sort of have to be done to coincide with each other. One thing
Yeah, and
leads
it's
on to the next.
it's
Mm,
not like I'm going to meditate once and all of a sudden I'm going to get super clear on things. It's a practice.
yeah.
It's sort of, I'm not sure about you, but to be fair, I definitely approach some of those mindfulness practices like, cool, I've sat here for 20 minutes. Nothing's really happened. Like, this might not be the tool
Mm,
for me. It's your point. It's like the consistent showing up and giving yourself that consistent space. I mean,
mm,
a 1 hour massage, or a 1 hour sauna, or just 1 hour quiet time might do you wonders as a temporary fix, but if you want deeper clarity, then you need to invest that longer term time. And I'm interested
Mm,
as well, you mentioned that a lot of people could be living other people's lives, and whether
mm,
that's influenced by family or environments. I think you and I both know how important our childhood experiences are in impacting who we are as adults. I'm interested to
mhm.
hear, what was your childhood experience like?
Really good. I had a really good childhood. I was born in England and I moved to Melbourne when I was 4. So, uh, and then I moved to Tassie when I was at the end of primary school. But I mean, I moved around a lot, but I've my upbringing was great. I'm very
Yeah.
much a reflection of both my parents, and I yeah, I loved it. Honestly, I can't fault it. It was good.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy for people to go like, I had a really great childhood, like I have nothing to complain about, or there was nothing wrong. And, despite all that, you still found yourself engaging in behaviors that weren't aligned with now who you've identified as your true self. What do you think was the catalyst for some of those behaviors, even though your childhood was seemingly so positive?
I mean, to be fair, my upbringing from my parents' side was great. I got bullied a little bit maybe when I was in primary school, but I don't think that was anything to do with it. I think um, it really came down to my self-esteem and it really came down to failed relationships. And I've said this before on a podcast. I really caused me to internally reflect on myself, and there was a few other things that I don't probably feel comfortable saying on a podcast, but that really contributed to that behavior. But I think I'm much more respectful and aware of, things that you see happening in life that you think will never happen to you or your family or anything like that. There's lots of different things where you think, oh, that's horrific. But then when it happens to you, you need to have coping mechanisms and ways of dealing with it. And I feel that's where philosophy's really helped me. I was always very philosophical in my mind, and I've found a lot of power in Stoic philosophy. And I find it fascinating that they would think the way that they did so many years ago, and I find that so applicable to life today. So I really leaned into that in my teens. It's helped me with a lot of thinking mechanisms for my mind,
Yeah.
ways of dealing with things in my mind.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's really easy for people to disregard their pasts, and a lot of our present day behaviors are stemmed for something that's happened in our past as well. And I've heard from my clients as well, is they go, "Oh, I don't want to think about what's happened in the past." And it's like, well, actually there's some clues there for you if you have it's not to say you need to go relive the traumas or anything like that. It's a
Mm,
simple acknowledgement of there's some previous experience that have influenced your current behaviors. It's accepting that and then be able to build on that foundation. And so thank you very
mm.
much for sharing that. And I'm interested to hear from the philosophy side of things. What in particular sort of inspired you about philosophy, or how was that tool useful for you at that point in time in your teens?
Yeah, I think it was Marcus Aurelius Meditations years ago. But in general, I find it just interesting because I think so much, and I like to think on a deep level. I was fascinated by how people would think 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. What are these people thinking about? That's what actually led me down that path. I'm like, if I'm thinking about stuff like now, what were they thinking about back then? So I started to look into literature, and I thought, surely I think I found myself Googling, you know, things that I thought, like, surely there's a blueprint for being happy, right? Like this, I'm not the first person that's ever been alive. Surely someone's worked it out. Like, what is it?
The
Huh.
secret to life. Someone's
Yeah,
surely
yeah,
asked this question before.
yeah. Like, what? I've got the internet. Like, surely someone knows. So I would Google things like that, and it would lead me down some philosophy stuff. And I really, really resonated with all that sort of stuff. So I found it fascinating. I really went out down a bit of a rabbit hole with it all in my teens, and I found it liberating. I lived a little bit in fear. I was very like fearful in my probably like early teens of I was very careful and methodical. I was always thinking about things, but it helped me be a little less, a little more carefree and a little less fearful in my life. And my fears changed. You become fear's a whole other topic, but your fears change as you get older, and things, your perspective on fear changes. And I became less fearful of like death and things like that. I use death as a motivational tool now rather than being scared of dying. You know, being scared of never really living true to my full potential is more of a fear to me. So things like that can give you a perspective shift through philosophy, and I do sort of mention it a little bit in some of my blogs, and it's really helped me. It's a good tool.
Yeah, and you touched on another good point there. I think the fear of not realizing your potential hits home as you get older. I think, and I'm in my early 30s too. Definitely in my friendship group, I think we're all going through this stage of our life now. Is like, what are we doing with our lives? Or surely there's more to life than what we're currently doing. That sort of jazz. And so I'm interested to hear,
Mm.
what are the conversations you have with your clients or people in your social circles who are going through that period of time, going, there's something else here. I can feel it. I just maybe don't know what that is or how to even start.
My housemate and I, Harry, we chat about this stuff all the time. We're always talking about um, what else is there, what more can we do? And I think that's what obviously led me down this path, and being able to lean into that. I think it's sort of paradox for me, because it's like I get the most out of coaching for me, but it's also like I'm trying to be selfless and do that for others. But I think I think this all really does come down to like finding your why and your purpose. Really does. I mentioned it earlier, is understanding what's most important to you, and then finding out how you can action those things. Uh, you might write down 3 of your personal values that you have, and then write 3 actions that you can do on a daily basis to live in accordance to those values. Something like that would help you live a little bit more fulfilled. But asking yourself a lot of internal questions, and being honest with yourself, I think that's what it comes down to. You've got your ego that's going to protect yourself. It's going to tell you what you want to hear. It's going to fluff you up and pump you up. But you need to push all that aside, and really ask yourself some serious questions, because a lot of people run from those questions. A lot of people hide from those really daunting questions. It's like quite a scary thing, but time's passing by. So, and it'll pass anyway, whether or not you choose to act on those things, or, if you're waiting, you know, like inertia, if you're waiting for something to knock you off your path, you may as well take control and take direction of your own life rather than waiting for someone else to dictate that.
Yeah, and you mentioned fear and how your fears can change as you get older. And I think when you do establish such a strong identity, and I mean, after 30 years on the earth, you're pretty solid in your foundation. Most people at age 30 have a pretty solid idea of who they are, their place in the world, and that sort of stuff. And so to start questioning that can be really scary for a lot of people, because if you start questioning your career, your relationships, and then the answers that could come of that, like if you suddenly realize by asking yourself those internal questions, hey, I actually don't want to be in my career, or, I've been with my partner for 10 years and actually this isn't the relationship for me. I think, and I'm
Hmm.
keen to hear your thoughts on this too, fear can actually stop people from asking those questions because they're fearful of what the answers could be. And so if someone's finding themselves in that position and they're like, I know I need to ask these questions, but I just not sure I'm prepared for the answers. How would you coach someone through that?
Well, it's a great analogy of that, because it's quite common as well. I think it's the greater fear. For me, I'd be much more fearful of living a life on someone else's terms, and that's what we mentioned earlier. That's something that you really need to be honest with yourself about. People haven't really considered the fact that we're only here for a short amount of time. So if you want to live someone else's life for 30 years, go nuts. Well, that scares me. So, and it scares me more than anything else. So, um, I'm very much, uh, very sure of the direction that I want to go in personally, but it's for other people that are in that same boat. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions, life, that's life. But I feel like I've watched so many people that have, wasted so many years because they are living someone else's life. You really need to ask yourself those important questions and make a decision that's good for you. You have to look after number one.
Yeah, and I mean, people who listen to podcasts first and foremost. Most of them are listening to this sort of podcast because they value growth, they value personal development. And so if someone's listening to this going, yeah, I'm a little bit scared to ask those questions, to your point, what happens if you don't start asking those questions? If you were living this life in 30 years from now, what would you be thinking? Would you be happy with that? Or would you be willing to settle for that? And again, to your point, if you're cool with that, then that's cool too. But chances are, if you're listening to this, it's because you want more out of life. And so, to your point, it's having the courage to ask yourself those seemingly scary questions, but also know, I mean, there's so many wonderful coaches out there in the coaching space too, is that if you decide to open that can of worms, there is support as well. It's not something that you need to do by yourself. And so on
Yeah.
that note too, what support did you bring into your network when you were making this significant identity change in your journey to sobriety?
As in like my friendship group and stuff.
Yeah, or just did you have any other mentors or anything like that? Like what support structures and systems did you put in place?
To be honest, I threw my birthday fell on grand final day, so I threw like a birthday party. I've mentioned this before, and I told my whole friendship circle about what I was doing and what I expected from them, and that was my safety net. That was like, okay, I've told everyone now, and I sort of like you sort of the pressure's on, sort of thing. You've committed. My family has been very supportive. Everyone's been very supportive, but it's strange because one of the biggest things I've found in my personal development journey is that you can have support and you can have people to guide you and you can have a coach. I have a coach, but you very much need to be accountable for yourself. You can't expect anybody else to do something for you. You need to go into everything with the expectation that you're on your own, and any help along the way is going to be a massive bonus. I think that accountability, you need to take 100% accountability for your life. You need to take 100% accountability for your actions and the way that it's going in, regardless of the situations that have been presented to you. I think no one yeah, that dawned on me. I think when I was like, no one's coming to save me. I remember having that thought several times when I was at my lowest of lows. I'm like, no one. Lots of people care about me. Lots of people love me, like my family and friends. But I'm on my own. And I need to get myself out of this position I'm in. So taking that full accountability really drove me to where I am today. And, I guess I had a little bit of expectations back then that someone would come and help me get out of that position. And I had friends that were supportive and that offered, like support, but you have to take full accountability. You have to take that's important.
I've never heard anyone say it so impactfully, the fact that you need to take accountability. You can have all the tools, all the support structures, throw all the money at your problems, but at the end of the day, you're the only one who can do something about it. To your point, no one's going to save you. A lot of people will probably want to save you, and if you allow them, that's
Mm,
probably not a healthy situation to be in either. But I think that ties in
yeah.
really nicely on the subject of taking accountability. If someone's going, yep, I need to change my direction. If, someone's finding themselves excessively drinking, taking lots of recreational drugs, engaging in any sort of addictive behavior excessively, what's something really
Mm.
actionable someone can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start to change their path?
I think the first thing you need to do is, I've mentioned this today, but is be very, very specific about the goal that you want to achieve. I think depending that it's very broad what people are doing out there. Like people might just want to reduce their alcohol intake. People might be, addicts. I don't know, but I think being very, very specific, put it down on paper, write it down, bring it into the physical world rather than just in your mind, and probably start by setting yourself at least one non-negotiable task that you are going to do on a daily basis, regardless. Like that's happening, and try and action that thing first thing in the morning. That's where I'd be starting.
Awesome. That is such wonderful, powerful advice. And to your point, that non negotiable tasks start to build some confidence in yourself and your ability to create change. I think that's a really wonderful first step. So, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Elliot, for your time today and for sharing
No
all of
worries.
your insights and expertise. It's been an absolute pleasure. And so, if someone's sitting here going, look, Elliot's my guiding light, he is my mentor who I need to inspire me on my journey, where can someone find
Yeah.
you?
Probably on Instagram. My handle is Elliott's Mind, and I will be, that's the main way to find me.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll put those details in the show notes too. But thank you again, Elliott, so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Myth. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I so enjoy having you here, and I hope you've taken away powerful insights and tools that will support you to achieve your high-level results. Now, before you go apply all of this wisdom in your life, I would be so grateful if you are able to leave us a podcast review on the platform that you're listening to, or share this episode with a friend. Your support means that we can help more self-led, high-performing individuals just like you expand what's possible for them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so please go on and shoot me a note on socials and let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at MiffGalloway. Now, go ahead and make those dreams a reality, because actually, you can.